They never told you the real game. They taught you to be nice, to be patient, to wait your turn, to speak when spoken to shrink yourself so others feel comfortable. And while you were busy being agreeable, someone else took the territory you were supposed to own. This is not a self-help video. I don't do affirmations. I don't do vision boards. I don't do just believe in yourself. What I do is strategy. Cold, calculated, unapologetic strategy. Today, I'm going to hand you 4 weapons that the most dangerous, most powerful, most untouchable men in history used to dominate every room they walked into. Thoughts, time, tongue, territory. Master these 4, and no one can touch you. Fail to master even one, and someone will use it against you. They already are. Machiavelli didn't write The Prince as a fairy tale. He wrote it as a manual. A cold, brutal, honest manual for men who refuse to lose. You want power? Then listen carefully, because I'm only going to say this once. Type Machiavellian mode on in the comments if you're ready. Let's begin. Part 1. Control your thoughts. The first battlefield. Most men will never win a single war in their life. Not because they lack strength, not because they lack resources, not because the world was unfair to them, but because they lost the only battle that ever mattered before it even began. The battle inside their own skull. Your mind is not your sanctuary. Not yet. Right now, for most of you listening, your mind is a battlefield occupied by your enemies, by every doubt someone planted in you, by every failure you replayed 1,000 times, by every fear that woke you up at Thram and held you hostage until sunrise. Machiavelli understood something that modern men are too distracted, too medicated, and too entertained to grasp, that a prince who cannot govern himself cannot govern anything. Power does not begin in boardrooms. It does not begin in bank accounts. It does not begin in status, or in muscle, or in the clothes you wear. Power begins in the 6 inches between your ears. And if that space is chaotic, if that space is weak, if that space is ruled by emotion and reaction instead of logic and intention, then everything you build on top of it will collapse. The Stoics called it the discipline of perception, the ruthless daily practice of choosing which thoughts you feed and which thoughts you starve. What you rehearse mentally, you perform externally. Guard your mind like a king guards his castle, because the man who controls his thoughts controls his entire reality. Drop my mind is my empire in the comments. Part 2. Control your time, the currency of the untouchable. Time is the only resource on this earth that cannot be earned back, cannot be borrowed, cannot be stolen from someone else and added to your own. And the moment you truly understand that, not intellectually, not as a concept you nod along to, but in your bones, in your gut, in the way you move through every single hour of every single day, is the moment you begin to separate yourself from the majority of men who are sleepwalking through their own lives, wondering why nothing is changing. Machiavelli was obsessed with the concept of fortuna, the idea that time and circumstance are like a river, wild and indifferent, and that the weak man gets swept away by it while the powerful man builds a dam, redirects the current, and bends the river to his will. Most men are not losing because they are lazy. Most men are losing because they are busy, dangerously, deceptively busy. Busy scrolling, busy reacting, busy attending to everyone else's priorities, while their own life quietly rots in the corner waiting for them to show up. The untouchable man treats his time like a weapon. He decides in advance where every hour goes. He eliminates without guilt. He declines without apology. He understands that every yes he gives to something small is a no he gives to something great, and he has made peace with that arithmetic in a way that most people around him will never understand and will often resent him for. Marcus Aurelius ruled an empire and still woke before dawn to write, to think, to prepare, not because he had extra time, but because he manufactured time by refusing to waste it on what did not serve his mission. Your calendar is a mirror. Look at it right now. and it will show you exactly what you value, exactly what you fear, and exactly why you are where you are. If you do not control your time, someone else is already controlling it for you, and they are not doing it in your favor. They never were, and they never will be. Drop time is my weapon in the comments right now if you understand what I just said. Because most people will hear these words and do nothing. But you are not most people, and that difference is exactly what this channel is built for. Part 3. Control your tongue, the sharpest blade you own. The most dangerous weapon ever created was not a sword, was not a gun, was not a bomb dropped from the sky. It was a mouth attached to an undisciplined mind. And throughout all of human history, more men have been destroyed by what came out of their lips than by any enemy that ever stood in front of them with a blade. Machiavelli wrote that it is better to be feared than loved. But what he understood even more deeply, what he embedded between the lines for those sharp enough to read it, was that the truly powerful man is neither feared nor loved in the way the common man understands those words. He is studied, he is watched, he is calculated, and his greatest advantage over every man in the room is that no one ever fully knows what he is thinking, because he made the decision long ago to let his silence do the work that other men exhaust themselves trying to do with noise. Most men talk too much. This is not an opinion, it is a diagnosis. They talk to fill silence, because silence makes them uncomfortable. They talk to prove themselves, because deep down they do not believe their presence alone is enough. They talk to seek validation, because somewhere along the way they outsource their confidence to the reactions of other people. And in doing all of this talking, all of this explaining, all of this oversharing and venting and performing, they hand their enemies a map, a detailed, annotated, highlighted map of every weakness, every fear, every pressure point that can be used against them. At the moment it will hurt the most. The Stoics had a practice. They called it keeping counsel with yourself before you speak, the deliberate pause between stimulus and response, where a man of discipline lives and a man of impulse dies. Robert Greene, who studied power more forensically than almost any modern writer, said it plainly: the more you say, the more common you appear, and the more common you appear, the less power you hold in any room you enter. Words, when used strategically, are not just communication, they are architecture. They are the invisible structure through which you shape how others perceive you, how they fear you, how they respect you, how they remember you long after you have left the room. The man who speaks only when his words add value, who withholds information not out of weakness, but out of strategic intelligence, who can sit in silence while everyone around him scrambles to fill it. That man owns the room without raising his voice, commands without issuing orders, and influences without anyone fully understanding how or when it happened. Tongue control is not about being quiet. It is about being so precise, so intentional, so devastatingly selective with your words, that when you do speak, every single person in that room stops what they are doing and listens. Because they have learned through experience that when you open your mouth, what follows is worth hearing. Guard your words the way a general guards classified intelligence, because in the wrong hands, your own words become the weapon used to dismantle everything you have built. Drop my silence is my power in the comments if this part just rewired something in your mind, because the men who understand the weapon of the tongue are the men who are never caught off guard, never manipulated, and never destroyed by their own voice. Part 4. Control your territory, the domain of the untouchable man. Territory is not just land. Territory is not just a physical space you can point to on a map or mark with a fence or defend with a weapon. Territory, in the truest, most powerful, most Machiavellian sense of the word, is every dimension of your life over which you exercise deliberate, unapologetic, and absolute dominion. And the man who fails to understand this broader definition of territory will spend his entire life defending borders he never consciously chose, while surrendering the ones that actually matter, Without even realizing, the invasion has already begun. Your territory is your mental space. Who gets access to your thoughts, your energy, your attention? Your territory is your physical environment, the spaces you inhabit, the standards you enforce within them, the quality of what surrounds you every single day. Your territory is your relationships, who you allow close, who you keep at a distance, who you remove without hesitation when they prove themselves a liability rather than an asset. Your territory is your reputation, the narrative that exists about you in the minds of others, and whether that narrative was written by you through deliberate action or written by your enemies through your silence and inaction. Machiavelli understood, with a cold clarity that made the princes of his era deeply uncomfortable, that a ruler who does not actively expand and defend his territory will inevitably find that territory being consumed by those around him. Because nature abhors a vacuum, because power abhors a vacuum. And the moment you stop pressing forward, the moment you become comfortable, the moment you tell yourself you have done enough and now you can rest, that is precisely the moment someone hungrier, someone colder, someone more strategically disciplined than you begins moving into the space. You stop defending. The Romans built the greatest empire in human history, not because they were the strongest people on earth, not because they were the most intelligent, not because fortune smiled on them more than it smiled on others, but because they had a philosophy of territorial expansion embedded in their culture, in their military doctrine, in their very identity as a civilization, a philosophy that said idle ground is lost ground, that standing still is moving backward, that the only acceptable direction is forward, always expanding, always consolidating, always reinforcing the gains already made while simultaneously reaching for the next position of strength. This same philosophy applies to your life with absolute precision. The man who does not set clear boundaries in his relationships finds those relationships slowly draining him of energy he cannot replace. The man who does not control his physical environment finds that environment subtly shaping his mindset in directions that serve everyone except himself. The man who does not actively manage his reputation finds that the world will assign him one by default, and that default is never flattering, never powerful, and never accurate. Territory control requires the willingness to be ruthless, not cruel, because cruelty is the weapon of the weak and the undisciplined, but ruthless in the sense that you are willing to make decisions that protect your domain even when those decisions are uncomfortable, even when they disappoint people, even when they make you appear cold to those who have never understood that coldness and clarity are not the same thing. That emotional detachment in service of strategic thinking is not a character flaw, but the highest expression of masculine discipline and self-governance that a man can achieve in this lifetime. You must decide today, not tomorrow, not after one more comfortable season of avoidance and people-pleasing and shrinking yourself to fit into spaces that were never designed to contain your full potential. You must decide today what ground you are willing to defend, what standards you are willing to enforce, what price you are willing to make others pay for violating the boundaries of the domain you are building, because that decision, made clearly and acted upon consistently, is what separates the man who is merely alive from the man who is genuinely dangerous, genuinely respected, and genuinely untouchable in every room, every relationship, and every arena he chooses to enter. Drop "I own my territory" in the comments right now if you felt this part in your chest. Because the men who claim their territory with intention are the men history remembers, and everything else is just noise made by people who never had the courage to draw a line and mean it. Part 5. The Machiavellian Mind. Think several moves ahead, or get played. The single greatest difference between the man who commands the game and the man who gets consumed by it is not intelligence in the conventional sense, is not raw talent, is not even experience accumulated over years of trial and error. It is the disciplined, practiced, almost obsessive habit of thinking in consequences rather than reactions, of seeing not just what is directly in front of him, but what is 3 moves ahead, 5 moves ahead, 10 moves ahead, of understanding that every action he takes today is a stone dropped into still water, and that the ripples from that stone will travel further and touch more shores than he can see from where he currently stands. And the man who accounts for those ripples before he drops the stone is the man who shapes outcomes while everyone else is left, scrambling to respond to them. Machiavelli did not admire impulsive men. He did not celebrate the warrior who charged blindly into battle on the fuel of emotion and pride and the intoxicating illusion of courage. He studied and admired the prince who could hold his fire, who could absorb an insult without flinching, who could watch an opportunity approach from a distance with the patience of a predator, who knows that timing is everything and that a strike too early is as fatal as a strike too late. This is the Machiavellian mind in its purest form. Not malicious, not paranoid, not the cartoonish villain that lesser minds reduce it to, when they lack the intellectual depth to understand what strategic thinking actually looks like from the inside, but precise, patient, perpetually calculating, always reading the room, always reading the people in the room, always asking the question that reactive men never think to ask, which is not what is happening right now, but rather, why is this happening? Who benefits from this happening? And what will happen next if I respond in the way that I am? Being provoked to respond. Chess players do not win by reacting to every move their opponent makes with equal and immediate force. They win by understanding their opponent's strategy before their opponent has fully revealed it, by sacrificing pieces that appear valuable in the short term to secure positions that are decisive in the long term, by making their opponent believe they are winning right up until the moment the board tells a completely different story. Your life is that board. Every relationship you are in, every professional environment you operate within, every social dynamic you navigate on a daily basis is a game with rules, with players, with moves and counter-moves, and the man who refuses to see it as such, who insists on operating from a place of pure authenticity and openness and naive good faith in every interaction, is not noble. He is a liability to himself. He is a gift to those around him who have no such illusions about the nature of human interaction, and who will use his openness as a door they walk through, uninvited whenever it serves them. This does not mean you become paranoid. This does not mean you trust no one and build walls so high that nothing and no one can reach you. Isolation is not power. Isolation is simply a different kind of weakness, wearing the mask of strength. What it means is that you develop the rare and formidable discipline of watching before you speak, of listening more than you contribute, of gathering information about the people and environments around you with the same systematic intentionality that a general gathers intelligence before committing his forces to a battlefield, because the man who knows the terrain, who knows the players, who knows the motivations and the fears and the pressure points of everyone in his orbit before they know his, that man does not react to the game. He architects it. He designs the conditions under which others make the moves he anticipated, under which outcomes unfold the way he calculated, under which his position grows stronger with every turn, while those who underestimated him find themselves in corners they do not remember walking into. Begin today to audit every significant interaction you have had in the last 30 days and ask yourself honestly, coldly, without ego or excuse, were you the one thinking several moves ahead, or were you the one being moved? Drop "I play the long game" in the comments if this part just changed the way you see the board, because the men who think ahead are the men who never get blindsided, never get manipulated, and never look back at a situation wishing they had seen it coming, because they already did. Part 6. The art of strategic silence, and calculated observation. See everything, reveal nothing. There is a level of power that most men will never access in their lifetime, not because it requires exceptional intelligence or extraordinary circumstances or some rare gift distributed only to the chosen few, but because it requires something far more difficult than any of those things. Something that goes directly against every social instinct the modern world has spent decades conditioning into you from the time you were old enough to understand language. It requires the absolute, iron-disciplined ability to watch, to listen, to absorb, to process, and to reveal nothing. To sit in the center of chaos and noise and social performance and human desperation and give away not a single card from your hand, not a single flicker of your true position, not a single unguarded moment that an observant enemy could photograph with his eyes and use against you at a time and place of his choosing rather than yours. Machiavelli wrote about the fox and the lion who has the strength to dominate through force, and the fox who has the cunning to navigate through traps. And he was explicit when he said that a prince must be both. That raw strength without cunning is a man who walks into every trap, ever, set for him with full confidence and zero awareness. And that cunning without strength is a man who sees every trap, but lacks the force to do anything meaningful once he has avoided it. But the man who combines both, the man who has developed his physical and psychological strength while simultaneously sharpening his capacity for observation and strategic concealment, that man exists in a category that most people do not have a framework to understand. And what they do not understand, they either fear or attempt to diminish, and either response tells you everything you need to know about where they stand relative to where you are going. Strategic silence is not the absence of contribution. It is the most sophisticated form of contribution available to a man who understands how information functions in human dynamics, how the person who speaks least in a room of talkers gradually accumulates a gravitational pull that the loudest voice in the room will never achieve, no matter how long he keeps talking, how the man who asks one precise question and then closes his mouth walks away from that conversation knowing more about the other person than the other person knows about himself, while the man who spent the entire conversation performing and oversharing walks away having handed over a complete psychological profile of his insecurities, his ambitions, his fears, and his blind spots to someone who may or may not have his best interests at heart. Observation is a discipline that must be practiced with the same intentionality and regularity that you practice any physical skill. It does not happen automatically. It requires you to consciously slow down your internal monologue, to quiet the noise of your own ego long enough to actually see what is happening in front of you, rather than what you assumed would be happening before you walked into the room. Watch how people behave when they believe no one important is watching them. That is who they are. Watch how people treat those who can do nothing for them. That is their true character. Watch where a person's eyes go when a name is mentioned in conversation. That tells you about alliances and tensions that no one will ever verbalize to your face. Watch how a person responds to your silence, because most people, confronted with silence from someone they are trying to read, will rush to fill that silence with information, with justification, with revelation, driven by a discomfort they cannot suppress. And in that rush, you will learn more in 30 seconds than you could have extracted through an hour of direct questioning. The untouchable man has mastered the art of being genuinely interested in other people, not out of warmth alone, but out of strategic intelligence, because every person he encounters is a source of data, a window into a network, a node in a web of relationships and motivations and loyalties and grievances that, once understood, gives him a navigational advantage through every social and professional landscape he chooses to move through. He does not broadcast his observations. He files them, he stores them, he connects them to everything else he has gathered, and he draws on them precisely when precision matters most. Not to destroy, not out of spite, but from a place of cold, clear, strategic positioning that ensures he is never the most surprised man in any room he occupies. See everything, process everything, reveal nothing, and watch how quickly the dynamic of every room you enter begins to shift in your favor without you having said a single unnecessary word. Drop I see what others miss in the comments right now if this part just unlocked something in you. Because the man who observes without revealing is the most dangerous and most respected presence in any environment he chooses to enter. And that presence, built through discipline and the quiet refusal to be ordinary, is exactly what this channel exists to help you become. Part 7. The power of emotional detachment. Feel nothing, control everything. Emotion is not your enemy. Let that be clear from the beginning, because misunderstanding this point will cost you more than any external adversary ever could. But unmastered emotion, unexamined emotion, emotion that sits in the driver's seat of your decision-making, while your logic and strategy ride helplessly in the back. That is the silent assassin that has ended more promising men, collapsed more powerful trajectories, and handed more unnecessary defeats to more capable individuals than any competitor, any circumstance, or any conspiracy ever assembled against them from the outside. The man who cannot detach emotionally from outcomes is a man who can be controlled, and the mechanism of that control is breathtakingly simple. Find what he loves and threaten it. Find what he fears and suggest it. Find what enrages him and whisper it. And watch him abandon every strategic advantage he spent years building in a single moment of reactive decision making, while his adversary, who engineered the provocation with cold precision, moves calmly into the position that the emotional outburst vacated. Machiavelli watched princes fall not to armies but to their own temperament, not to superior enemies but to inferior impulses. And he documented this pattern with the clinical detachment of a man who understood it not as a flaw unique to weak individuals, but as a universal human vulnerability that only the most disciplined and strategically serious among them ever successfully brings under conscious control. Emotional detachment in the Machiavellian framework does not mean feeling nothing, caring about nothing, connecting with no one. That is damage wearing the costume of strength. Because a truly detached man still feels, still values, still connects. But he has built between his feelings and his actions a firewall of deliberate pause where he can experience an emotion fully and then consciously decide whether acting on it serves his long-term strategic position or only the immediate need for emotional release at the expense of everything he is building. The Stoics called this the space between stimulus and response, and they treated its cultivation as the highest form of human freedom. Because a man in chains who governs his emotional responses is freer than a king who makes decisions from a place of anger or wounded pride rather than cold, strategic rationality. In practical terms, this means you train yourself to pause before responding to provocation, to sleep on decisions that carry emotional weight, to ask in the heat of any moment not what do I feel like doing, but what does my strategy require, and to recognize the specific triggers your psychology is vulnerable to, because your enemies will find them eventually, and your only protection is having found them first, and built around them a response protocol that depends not on willpower alone, but on systems and self-knowledge that most men avoid, because honest self-examination requires a courage more rare and more consequential than physical bravery. Detach from outcomes enough to execute with clarity. Detach from the opinions of others enough to serve your mission rather than your image, and you will discover that emotional detachment is not coldness, but the highest form of self-mastery in a world that profits from keeping you reactive and permanently off balance. Drop I master my emotions. My emotions do not master me in the comments if this part just handed you a weapon you did not have before today. Because the man who controls his emotional state controls his destiny. And that control begins not tomorrow, but right now, with the decision to never again. Let what you feel override what you know. Part 8. The Machiavellian Code of Alliances. Who you allow in your circle determines how far you go. There is a truth so uncomfortable, so socially inconvenient, so fundamentally at odds with everything you were taught about loyalty and friendship, and the nobility of standing by people, regardless of what they bring to your life, that most men spend decades refusing to acknowledge it, even as the evidence accumulates around them with the relentless consistency of a natural law. And that truth is this: you will never outgrow the average of the people you refuse to outgrow. You will never build beyond the ceiling of the environment you are too emotionally attached to leave. You will never become the man you are capable of becoming, while dedicating your most valuable resources of time and energy to relationships designed for a version of you that no longer exists, and that actively resist the emergence of the version of you that is trying to be born. Machiavelli was ruthlessly clear on the subject of alliances. He did not romanticize them. He did not moralize about them. He did not dress them in the comfortable language of sentiment that makes the reality of human alliance easier to swallow, but infinitely harder to navigate with strategic intelligence. He assessed alliances the way a general assesses terrain, with cold eyes and practical questions, asking not who is pleasant to be around, but who is useful; not who makes me feel comfortable, but who makes me better; not who has been with me longest, but who is aligned with where I am actually going. Because longevity in a relationship is not the same as value in a relationship, and confusing the two is one of the most expensive mistakes a man building toward power can make in this lifetime. The people closest to you are not neutral forces in your life. They are either accelerants or they are anchors, either pulling you upward through the example they set and the standards they hold you to, or pulling you downward through the mediocrity they normalize and the subtle but devastating social pressure they apply every time you begin to grow in a direction that makes them confront the distance between where you are going and where they have chosen to remain. Weak men surround themselves with people who make them feel superior, rather than people who make them feel challenged. Because the ego finds comfort in being the smartest in the room, even as the intellect starves for the friction and competition that actually produce growth. And this single pattern, this one quiet, socially acceptable, endlessly rationalized mistake of choosing comfort over challenge in the construction of your inner circle, is responsible for more wasted potential and more unfulfilled destiny than almost any other force operating in the lives of men who had every ingredient for greatness except the environment necessary to activate it. Machiavelli advised the prince to choose advisors not on the basis of their agreeableness, but on the basis of their honesty and competence, to create conditions where people felt safe to tell him difficult truths rather than comfortable lies. Because the prince, surrounded by yes men, navigates reality with a blindfold on, making decisions based on a flattering version of the world that dissolves on contact with actual circumstances and leaves him exposed and strategically naked at precisely the moments when clarity matters most. Audit your circle today with the cold, honest, unapologetic eyes of a Machiavellian strategist. Ask of every significant relationship what this person adds to your capacity, your growth, and your mission. And then ask what this person costs you in energy, in time, and in the gravitational pull they exert on the trajectory of your ambitions. And if the honest answer reveals relationships costing more than they contribute, understand that keeping them out of guilt or habit is not loyalty. It is self-sabotage dressed in the language of virtue. And the man you are trying to become cannot afford that kind of sentimentality in the construction of the life he is here to build. Drop my circle reflects my standard in the comments right now if this part made you think about who is currently in your inner circle and whether they belong there. Because the alliance you build around yourself is the single most powerful environmental decision you will ever make. And the men who get this right early move faster, build stronger, and arrive further than anyone who watched them start could have predicted. Part 9. The dark side of ambition. Why most men self-sabotage before they ever arrive there is a phenomenon so widespread, so consistently observed across the lives of men who had every external ingredient for success and still managed to destroy their own progress from the inside. That, psychologists have named it, and philosophers have written about it, and strategists have warned against it for centuries. And yet, despite all of that accumulated wisdom, sitting available and accessible to any man willing to seek it out, it continues to claim victim after victim in every generation, in every culture, in every socio-economic bracket, at every level of education and opportunity. And that phenomenon is self-sabotage, the deeply unconscious, devastatingly effective, almost invisible process by which a man becomes the primary architect of his own defeat, not through lack of effort, not through lack of vision, not through lack of raw capability, but through the activation of psychological mechanisms so deeply buried beneath his conscious awareness that he experiences their destruction as bad luck, as the betrayal of others, as the cruelty of circumstance, as anything except the brutal truth, which is that he did this to himself, and that, until he understands exactly how and exactly why, he will continue doing it again in an endlessly repeating cycle of almost and not quite that consumes decades of potential and leaves nothing behind except the hollow, haunting question of what might have been if he had only gotten out of his own way. Machiavelli understood that the most formidable enemy a prince would ever face was not the rival at the gate or the conspirator in the court, but the weakness within his own character that he refused to examine, the blind spot in his own psychology that he refused to illuminate, the comfort zone in his own habits that he refused to abandon, even as it quietly strangled every initiative he attempted to launch from within its suffocating embrace. Self-sabotage wears many masks, and this is precisely what makes it so difficult to identify. It wears the mask of perfectionism that delays action indefinitely under the justification of not being ready yet. It wears the mask of self-destructive behavior that arrives precisely when things begin going well, as if success itself triggers an alarm in the subconscious of a man who was never taught to believe he deserved it. It wears the mask of procrastination and distraction as a substitute for the terrifying and necessary act of actually beginning. It wears the mask of unconscious pattern. Repetition, where a man keeps choosing the same kinds of relationships and the same kinds of situations that have failed him before. Because familiarity, even painful familiarity, feels safer than the unknown territory of genuine growth and genuine change. The Machiavellian response to self-sabotage is not passive reflection or waiting for insight to arrive organically. It is the aggressive, systematic, forensic self-examination of your own patterns, your own triggers, your own recurring points of failure, conducted with the same cold objectivity you would apply to studying an external enemy. Because that is precisely what the self-sabotaging part of you is, an internal enemy operating behind friendly lines, using your own psychology against you with an intimacy that no external adversary could ever achieve. And defeating it requires you to see it clearly, name it precisely, and then build systems around yourself that make acting against your own interests structurally difficult, rather than depending on willpower alone to carry you through the moments when your deepest fears and oldest wounds are pulling hardest against everything you say you want. Drop "I am my own greatest ally" in the comments if this part just forced you to look at yourself differently. Because the man who conquers his internal enemy has already won the most important battle of his life, and every external victory that follows is simply a reflection of that internal conquest made visible to the world around him. Part 10. The Untouchable Man. How to become someone the world cannot ignore. This is where everything converges. This is where every lesson, every principle, every cold and deliberately uncomfortable truth delivered across every part of this monologue stops being individual pieces of wisdom and begins functioning as a unified system, a complete architecture of power and presence and strategic selfhood that, When applied with consistency and the relentless daily discipline that separates men who talk about transformation from men who actually achieve it, produces something so rare, so commanding, so fundamentally difficult to overlook or dismiss that the world has only one available response. And that response is respect. Deep, involuntary, sometimes reluctant respect of the kind that cannot be performed or purchased, but only earned through the sustained demonstration of a man who has mastered himself completely and moves through the world from that mastery as is permanent and unshakable. Foundation. The untouchable man is not a myth. He is not a fantasy constructed by men who want power without the price of power. He is not the protagonist of a story that only exists in motivational content, consumed by people more addicted to the feeling of inspiration than to the practice of transformation. He is real. He has existed throughout history in every culture and every era. He exists today in the rooms you have not yet entered. And the single most important thing you need to understand is that he was not born untouchable. He was built, deliberately, systematically, painfully, through the accumulation of every discipline discussed in this monologue, applied day after day, in the absence of applause, in the absence of validation, sustained purely by the internal certainty of a man who decided at some fundamental, unalterable level of his being that he was going to become this or die, trying, because the alternative, the life of the undisciplined, the reactive, the average, the invisible, that alternative was simply no longer acceptable. Thoughts controlled means your internal world is a fortress rather than a battlefield, means you direct your mental energy with surgical precision toward what builds you rather than what diminishes you, means you have taken full sovereign ownership of the 6 inches between your ears that everything else in your life flows from. Time-controlled means you have stopped bleeding your most irreplaceable resource into other people's priorities and started investing it with the cold intentionality of a man who understands that how he spends his hours is how he spends his life, and that no hour surrendered to distraction is ever recovered. Tongue-controlled means your words carry weight because you have made them rare, means your silence commands attention because people have learned that what follows it matters, means you have removed from your adversaries the easiest weapon they had, which was your own unguarded mouth speaking. Truths you should have kept classified. Territory controlled means you have drawn your lines and defend them without apology, means your standards are visible in everything you do and everything you refuse to do, means the domain of your life reflects the internal order of a man who governs himself and cannot be governed by anyone else. This is the Machiavellian mode. This is what this channel exists to build in every man serious enough to keep showing up, to keep doing the work, to keep choosing discomfort over stagnation and strategy over impulse and power over the passive, comfortable, invisible life that the world will offer you every day as an acceptable alternative to greatness. Drop "I am untouchable" in the comments right now, because you have earned that declaration by sitting through every part of this monologue and absorbing what most men will scroll past without a second thought. And if this content added something real to your life today, if it shifted something in your thinking, then hit that like button right now. Subscribe to Machiavellian Mode if you have not already, because this channel is built for the man who is serious about power and the life that comes with it. And turn on notifications, because what is coming next makes everything you just heard look like the introduction, because we are only getting started, and the men who stay will understand exactly why they did.